I think probably all of us have noticed over the last while that we can't necessarily do all the same things that we used to do, and we can't even serve each other the way that we used to. Um, and so, what I want us to do over the next number of weeks is go through some of the characters in the Bible that actually found themselves in prison or found themselves restricted. And I want us to work through this together and to understand how to do what God wants us to do when we're not where we want to be, or how to live for God when we're in prison, when we're confined, when we're held back from what we want to really be doing. And I was just thinking a little bit this week of how so many of us have been really limited from what we typically would be doing as far as how we would minister to one another, how we would kind of serve God, if you will. Dania, I'm not sure if you're watching, but I was thinking about you and all the work that you and the ones on the Station 3 committee put into making sure that the young people are really trained to live like Jesus in Station 316, and also all the work that you put into making sure that our young people are matched up with adults where they can work together and that they can learn from each other and build relationships and all of that. Like, just so much effort and work goes into that. And now there's no Station 316. For those of you saw Rick Kennedy there earlier, Rick and Ann, and those on the community care committee, where in the run of a year, I easily feed more than 1,000 people from our community in the school system, and all of that, all the work and effort that goes into that. Now it's just shut down. It's just gone, right? Those of you that help in so many ways in our ministries and leading music at church and playing instruments, and all of that just seems to be like on hold and shut down. It's kind of limiting. It's kind of restricting, right? It's kind of like there's some bars there. We've been imprisoned a little bit. And I want us to really come to grips with this. How do we do what God wants us to do when we're not where we want to be? If you think of in the Bible, you've got ones like Samson, Jeremiah, Zedekiah, Daniel, John the Baptist, Peter, James, John, Silas, Paul, Jesus himself, Joseph. So many people found themselves in prison for one reason or another. And today I just want to look at the example of Joseph and learn just one thing from him and his experience of being in prison. And I think probably all of us know the story of Joseph and how his in his home, his father especially loved him, and we know about his special coat that was made for him, and how Joseph had that kind of place of honor in his family. But the rest of his siblings, they weren't so excited about that, and so they decided to kill him. But then they had a bright idea that they could actually make some money off him. So instead of killing him, they sold him as a slave. And so then Joseph finds himself as a slave in Potiphar's house. And as he's there, he begins to just help people, serve people, and do things to the very best of his ability. And so Potiphar gave him kind of the highest position that a slave could have in his home. And he not only got the attention of Potiphar, but Potiphar's wife also started paying attention to Joseph, and not in a good way, and tried to seduce Joseph. And Joseph resisted that, which made Potiphar's wife angry. So she made an false accusation against him, which made Potiphar angry, which meant Joseph found himself in prison. Now, Joseph was very fortunate because somebody who was accused of doing what he was accused of doing normally would be killed. But Potiphar, for one reason or another, maybe he didn't really believe his wife. Maybe his wife felt guilty and argued that Joseph shouldn't be killed. I don't know what the story is, but for some reason, Joseph wasn't killed, but instead found himself in prison. Now, a slave is pretty low, right, on the status level. The only way you could get lower is to be a criminal. And so that's where Joseph found himself, and everything was taken from him. Everything he loved, everything he had given himself to and worked towards, it was all taken away, and now he's confined in this prison. We read in Genesis 39, verse 20, so Potiphar took Joseph and threw him in prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. Some of us this morning have lost other things besides our ability to serve in church, the ways that we used to, whether it was in Awana, community family night, whatever it was. Some of you have lost jobs or unemployment. Some have lost the ability to have the same income that you had before. Hours have been cut back. Very difficult situations, very restricting, confining. Some of you, just the things that you used to like to do, maybe you're in retirement and had all kinds of plans of travel and things that you wanted to do, and all of a sudden it's just gone. I don't even know if Sandy and I can car camp this summer. Like, even that. Now, we can definitely camp in our car, but we've been talking about it, and bathrooms and showers might be an issue. So I think we'll stay close to home. We definitely are losing stuff and losing the capacity to do the things that we love. And this whole issue of COVID-19 aside, some of you, maybe even just health issues, might be confining you, holding you back. Just the realities of aging can all of a sudden confine us, and the things that we used to love to do and the ways that we used to love to serve others and to serve God is all of a sudden restricted. And it's like we're imprisoned, we're held back, we're behind bars. We want to be out there, we want to be doing stuff, but we just simply can't. Now, as Joseph found himself in prison, he could have got depressed and he could have given up on God. I mean, following God up until this point had got him kicked out of his family, had got him sold into slavery, and then got him into prison. Things hadn't been going really well, right? But Joseph didn't miss a beat. As soon as he encountered these new restrictions, he just looked for new ways to serve. In verse 23, we read this: the warden, that's the prison warden, had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with Joseph and caused everything he did to succeed. So as soon as Joseph finds himself in jail, instead of looking at him, instead of looking at all he had lost and how he couldn't do the things that he used to be able to do, and he'd worked so hard to get it where he was, and that was all taken away, instead of thinking about that stuff, instead of getting depressed, instead of kind of moping and all of that, he starts looking around and sees, like, who's in this cell with me? And he sees that there are other prisoners in that prison, and he starts to evaluate, what are their needs? What are they lacking? And he starts working to make sure that all their needs are met, so that they're not just surviving, they're doing as best as they could while in prison. Now, that was the warden's job, right? The prison warden, he was to make sure that everybody, had food and stayed alive and that we're taken care of. Well, Joseph just started taking over and doing that stuff, and doing it, frankly, better than what the warden could have done. And so the warden recognized this, and he's like, this is like vacation for me. And he just let Joseph do his thing. And he started giving Joseph more and more freedoms in the prison so that he could take care of everyone else. And this is really our first assignment from prison, is we need to be looking at what we can do for others. Look at what we can do for others, and if all we see is the bars, the restrictions, we're just going to be stuck in prison forever, right? We're never going to move forward. If all you see is bars until you look around at the other people in the cell with you. And as soon as we see that there are other people feeling restricted, there are other people who have been losing too, we can start meeting their needs, seeing what their hurts are. So I want us all this week to take this seriously. Look at what we can be doing for others. Now, when you're starting to evaluate needs and what needs people have, you might be fully aware that you have needs yourself. And it's okay to be concerned about those needs and to make sure that those get met. In Philippians 2 and verse 3, it says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. And don't look out only for your own interests, but take interest in others too. Now, the first part of verse 4 says, don't look out only for your own interests. In other words, Paul there is saying it is totally normal and healthy and right for you to see the needs that you have. And if you're in financial need, or if you're just downright lonely, recognize that need. And don't keep that need to yourself. Communicate that to others. Do something about that need. Make sure that those needs are met. That is not unspiritual or selfish. But here's the issue. It says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. And if we're in a spot that all we're thinking about is ourselves, if we're only thinking about how we have lost, how we are restricted, how we now don't have the same things we had before. Some of you kids that are watching this morning, younger people, you have lost some things, right? You have lost your ability to hang out with your friends, to have birthday parties, right? To go to school. Now, you might be excited about not going to school. I don't know. But you've definitely lost. But others have lost too. So it's important to see that, yeah, I've lost stuff. My life has changed, but others have changed too. Don't only look at our own interests, but look at others and see what hurts they might have, what needs they might have, and make sure that we are doing what we can to satisfy those needs that others have. If Joseph had only looked out for his own needs, if he'd only thought about himself in prison, if you read the whole story, I don't believe he ever would have got out of that prison. It would have been a life sentence. But because Joseph was constantly looking out for other people, all of a sudden, this became a place where he was free. He was free to serve. He was free to do what God had for him to do. And we might find that during this time of restrictions, that we might find more freedoms than we ever had before. More ways to serve others, more way to include others, more way to meet people's needs than we ever had before. And yes, the things that we were doing when we met in a physical building, they were great and they were meaningful, but we can find great things and meaningful things to do now to minister to each other's needs. As long as we are only focusing on us, as long as I'm only focusing on me, I will constantly feel confined. Quarantine or no quarantine, right? We can't serve each other and serve God the way we used to, but that doesn't mean we don't serve. We're not on vacation. We just have a new assignment. We've not been pulled from serving. We've been pushed into a new role. And we need to recognize that. And that's what Joseph did so effectively. He saw, okay, I'm not a slave anymore. Now I'm a prisoner. Well, now as a prisoner, I am going to serve others the same way I served others when I was in Potiphar's house as a slave, and the same way I served my father and my family when I was at home. He didn't miss a beat. He just kept finding new ways to minister to people's needs. And that's what we need to be. That's what we need to do. And I believe that's what we are doing. Now, if I could try to get really practical for a second, for those of you that are watching that maybe you're elementary school age, what can you do? How can you look out and see the needs of people in your home? And how can you find the new way for you to serve God when life is different for you and you can't do the same things you wanted to do? Here's just a little idea, and I'm sure all of you will love this. Maybe once a day, say these words: what can I do to help? Maybe say that to your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister. Can I help you with that? And just look for once a day a way that you can help others. And if you can get really good at that, man, that is awesome, because when we follow Jesus, one of the things that we have to learn how to do is to help others, to see other people's needs and make sure that we step in and help. And so if you can learn that at your age and take this time to learn how to see when others need help, I mean, that is just something that not only will God be pleased with, but your parents will be pleased with, and I know you will be pleased with it as well as you see God working in you. If you're middle school age, look for ways to do things that would be helpful to your siblings without even saying anything, just stepping in. Maybe do one of their jobs around the house for them. Like, they will nearly faint if you just step in and do the dishes for them, right? Look for opportunities to step in and do things when you're not even asked. Here's something for teenagers to work on during this time of being confined: is take time to make conversations with your siblings, if you have them, or your parents, and bring up something that they are interested in, but you aren't. In other words, initiate a conversation where you are getting somebody to talk to you about something they're excited about, but you don't care anything about. And you say, why would you do that? How would that please God? How is that serving others? And this is a huge thing. When we serve God, we are following the example of Jesus, and Jesus is empathetic. In other words, he sees the hurts of other people. He sees the excitement of other people. We as Christians are people who weep with those who weep, and we mourn with those who mourn. In other words, we see the hurts of others, and we feel the hurts of others, and we get involved in other people's lives. And there's something that goes on in a teenage brain, and it's not your fault. It's just we get very fixated on what's going on in my life and what I'm excited about. And if at your age you can learn to broaden and to see the needs of others and the excitement of others and the concerns of others, and enter into other people's worlds and see through their eyes, that'll set you on your way to being like Jesus in such a huge way, right? A simple little thing that we can do while we're in quote unquote prison, while we're confined, while we're in this time of restriction. Here's one final little example. Those of you that are single, I know I've been praying for many of you. I can't imagine how hard it must be for some of you who are in isolation by yourself, nobody else in your home. Now, some people might be in their home wishing some other people would get out. I don't know what's going on in all the homes, but I can tell you it must be so hard for those of you that are on your own in your house 24/7 and having to stay distant, maybe not being able to have grandchildren over or children over, all of that stuff, just so hard. And there must be loneliness, right? Must be discouragement that creeps in. It definitely must feel like a prison. Well, I would just encourage you to take a page out of Joseph's book. Look at who's in the cell with you. Who else might be in a similar situation to you? And if you don't know anybody, give me a call or talk to Ian, talk to one of the elders and ask, like, who's in a similar situation to me? Who might be lonely, have nobody to talk to or whatever, and make those calls. Keep in contact. Make sure somebody else's need is being met. If all we focus on is what we have lost, we will just get discouraged, depressed, anxious, all that stuff. That's not what God has called us to be, and that's not what God has called us to do, to be totally caught up with ourselves. We find ourselves in this new spot, this new world, however long it's going to last, and we're not on vacation. We haven't been put on hold. God hasn't said, oh, well, let's just take a break from this church thing and this my body. I'll just let it be paralyzed for a while. No, God's body, his church, his family is still active, right? It's just God has given us a new assignment. We're not on a break from gathering and serving. We're not on a break from encouraging one another and to love God by loving others. We're not on a break from that. God is just showing us a new way to gather, new ways to serve, new ways to show his love. So let's not grieve for what has been taken from us. Let's just praise God for the new opportunities. I'll give you a little illustration of this. Ian made reference to this earlier, but our capacity to share the message of Jesus is actually growing during this time. For example, Healthy Minds. Have met the last couple of weeks. Darren and I are, for the next little while anyway, going to kind of take turns on alternating Friday nights at 7:00. And as we meet together and as we kind of encourage each other as far as how to overcome things like anxiety and depression and those type of issues, it's awesome that we as a church can do that, and we can do that, everybody kind of in their own homes and everything. But here's something that struck me is Healthy Minds could go international, right? We're no longer confined to Hampton geography. You might have a friend who might benefit from Healthy Minds who lives in Vancouver, and you can invite them to join with you, right? And we could have somebody halfway around the world to join, and we can minister, right? Our capacity to minister is actually bigger. We just have to open our eyes and see how God is going to use us during this unique circumstance. So as long as we're in prison, as long as we're confined, as long as we're in quarantine and all that stuff, let's take this new assignment with enthusiasm. Let's look around our prison and see the needs that are here. See our cellmates, see those that are also confined who maybe might be discouraged because of what they have been losing. And let's do what we can do for them. Let's come together. Let's make sure that we're not just interacting this one time a week, but that we're encouraging each other, whether it's with comments on our Facebook page or YouTube, whatever, or whether it's just sending messages back and forth to one another, phone calls, meeting on Zoom, whatever it is that we can do to be an encouragement, to be here for each other. Let's make sure we do that. We're not on vacation. We have a new assignment, and let's just do it with the same passion that we've served God in the past.
Everyone needs compassion, love that never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of a Savior, the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again. Give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over You've been so, so good to me. Oh, I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shine you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh,